Hey everyone, this is Sam with Bartos Builds, and I am so excited to show you guys the process of making this law enforcement inspired flag. I do want to say right off the bat that I will not be reading off a piece of paper. I listened to some of my older videos, and to be honest, I sound a little bit too much like Russell from Up. If you don't get that reference, here you go.
D-card.
Good afternoon. My name is Russell, and I am a wilderness explorer in Tribe 54. Sweat Lodge.
Which, don't get me wrong, Russell is debatably one of the best characters that Disney has ever put out. I just want my personality to kind of show through in more of these videos, and I feel like reading off a piece of paper is not the way to do that. So the only thing you've seen me do up to this point is spray mold release into the mold and pour a really thin layer of blue epoxy. I'm putting in these wood inserts because there's going to be empty bullet shell casings in this, so when I run it through my table saw and stuff like that, I want to make sure that it's not the metal of the casings going through. This wood barrier gives me a little bit more of wiggle room. A little quick tip: anytime you make an epoxy pour and you have something in the pour that might release bubbles, a quick simple solution is to fill it with glue from a hot glue gun. So every single shell casing you just saw me put into the mold is completely filled to the top with hot glue from a hot glue gun. Initially, when I made that first pour of the blue epoxy, I was thinking my second pour would be another thin layer just to kind of encapsulate the bullets in the epoxy. I was nervous that the bullets would either float to the top or move around too much, and I wouldn't have much control over where they ended up. When I made the pour, however, to my surprise, they really didn't move around much at all. So what I thought was going to be a thin pour ended up being a solid, 2 to 3 inch pour. From there, I started the cleanup process. The cleanup process was just a few cuts on the miter saw, shallow passes on the joiner. When you're working with a joiner, you don't want to take too much off at one time. I then brought it over to the table saw, where I worked my way into the wood barrier. So as you can see, the wood barrier is doing a fantastic job of separating my table saw blade and the bullets inside the epoxy. If you've ever worked with epoxy, you know just how much of a mess it can make. As you can see on my table saw, it looks almost like the Denali Mountain in Alaska. That's with dust collection. So if you're working with epoxy, I just want to make a point. It makes an absolute mess. After the table saw, I brought it over to the planer. The same rules apply for the planer as it does for the joiner. You want to take off as thin of material as you possibly can. The more passes, the better. This particular piece was wet sanded all the way up to 10,000 grit. So right here you see me starting at 80 grit. And I do want to emphasize just how difficult it was to minimize the amount of sanding videos I have in this specific video, because there was a lot. Once the piece is sanded to around 100, 120, I go in with the round over bit on my router. I like to do it in the earlier stages of sanding because if my router leaves any lines on the stripes or anything like that, my sanding progression will easily get those lines and any marks or anything that the router leaves behind. I sanded the rest of the stripes up to, I believe it was 220. You don't necessarily have to go to 220. 150, 180 would be more than suffice for a piece like this. I'm not exactly sure why I started burning every other stripe in the flag, because I end up using the torch to burn every single stripe. I think after I burned these stripes and I applied the stain, I liked how it looked so much that I ended up burning the entire flag and all the stripes. When applying this brown stain, I really wasn't being careful at all. I knew the other stripes were going to be black in color, and I figured if some of the brown stain made its way onto the black stripes that you wouldn't really be able to tell. You'll see a little later in the video that when I apply the black stain, I do tape off the brown stripes because the black could definitely be detrimental to the brown, whereas if a little bit of the brown got into the black, I wasn't really too concerned about it. When you're using a torch, it's actually really cool to see, how the grain pops in different patterns and stuff like that. So for example, if you look at the stripe that's closest to us compared to the stripe that I just burned, the grain patterns and all that stuff, like each piece of wood is completely different and unique in its own way, which is, I don't know, I could be a wood nerd, but to me it's really, really cool to see. A key tip here, when you're getting close to the tape and close to where the stripes separate, press down firmly on the tape and pull towards the center of the piece. So this will prevent some bleed out, this will prevent the stain from kind of going underneath the tape. I then use my Dremel tool to start hogging out the stars. The first initial cuts I make with the Dremel, I use a thin bit and I do just the outline of the stars. I then take the stencil off and I put on a thicker bit. The thicker bit enables more material to come off, and the outline of the stars that I initially made helps prevent the thicker bit from leaving the areas where I want the bit to go. I will just say, when you're doing this part of the process, remember patience is key. There's 50 stars that have to be done, and each star takes about, I'd say 45 seconds to a minute each star. So right off the bat, you're looking at about 50 minutes to an hour to do this part of the project. This is handmade, there's no CNC, I don't own a CNC, I don't know how to use a CNC, so all this is handmade, definitely worth it in the end, but patience is key. Needless to say, in this project, there was a lot of sanding. I have a lot of video of sanding material. This is just a quick snippet. This is wet sanding, so you spray it with water first initially, and you go in with whatever sander you have. If you have to hand sand it, that's fine too, and you use wet sandpaper. Once again, I brought this all the way up to 10,000 grit. After your sanding progressions, your piece should look something like this. It's still a little bit hazy, still got some scuffs on it, it's not perfect, but in a few seconds I'm going to show you how to use compound and polish and get that really crystal clear finish. So like I said, we're going to use the compound. I believe this product was 3M compound. I have an attachment that goes on the drill. It's actually pretty cool. I got it on Amazon. The attachment comes with a bunch of foam pads, from really, really hard, dense pad to the softer ones. I think they even have one with like a feather on it or something. I don't really know what you would use that for, but it comes in the pack. I'll do my best to leave a link to everything I use in this video down in the video description below. Then repeated the same steps with a polishing product. Your project's really going to start coming to life at this point. As you can see, it's almost crystal clear. You can see right through it. You can see the blue epoxy at the bottom. The bullets look fantastic. At this point of the project, I was pretty pumped. I was pretty amped up. I was going back and forth for a while on how to kind of glue these pieces up. I know I could have used wood glue, but my concern was, would wood glue really bond well to epoxy? Would it make a very solid bond? And I didn't think so. So I went out and I bought, I believe this is like Gorilla Glue, 5-minute epoxy or something like that. Mix it up really quick. I believe it sets in about 15 minutes. I felt better going this route because I really don't think the wood glue would have given me the bond that I was going for. Quick note, I did put tape on the wood. Any epoxy squeeze out could really ruin the project at this point, so make sure you tape up your piece, protect the other stripe. I do have to apologize, this is the only video footage I have of the actual glue up. I think, honestly, this part of the process was a little stressful, so I don't think I recorded the top half, but you glue up the top half the same exact way that you glued up the bottom half. I used that same 5-minute epoxy, and I repeated the steps that you're seeing here. While we're getting ready for the finishing process, I just want to say thank you so much for watching this video. If you've made it this far, I really appreciate it. If you feel like I've earned it, please feel free to like and subscribe. I love doing these projects. I'm trying to get better at doing these videos, but not the most tech savvy. But from the bottom of my heart, thank you so much for watching this video. The wood finish I used for this was Odie's oil. It's super easy to apply. Just kind of rub it on, wait about an hour, come back and buff off any residue that's left over. You can just tell from top to bottom right here in this shot how vibrant it makes it. When you're applying the wood finish to the actual stars, you want to make sure that you get into every single nook and cranny. Once again, a very tedious part of this process, but it's very important. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I hope you enjoy the final shot.